For those who've just joined, we're just getting started here. So thanks for joining, and we'll get rolling shortly.
All righty. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, and welcome to the Strive Young Professionals Group's virtual Lunch and Learn. We thank you for joining us today and taking some time for this important conversation on diversity and inclusion. If anybody does not know who I am, I'm Derek Jackson. I am the chair of the Strive Young Professionals Group. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge and recognize that though we are gathered virtually, we are here today as a community on the Robinson-Huron Treaty Territory, and that on this land where we gathered, albeit virtually, is on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, and Métis people. The Anishinaabe people, this sacred and spiritual place has been known as Bawatang. Strive Young Professionals Group acknowledges the importance of our relationship with the Indigenous communities in Algoma as we move forward together in the spirit of reconciliation. Before we dive in, I just want to go over a really quick few housekeeping rules. If you haven't already, I'm going to ask that you ensure your mics are muted, and we ask that if you try to remain muted during the presentation. Please feel free to use the chat box to respond to any questions or to ask any questions you may have yourself. Since we are doing this virtually and we have a tight agenda, myself and the other Strive volunteers may not be able to respond to everyone directly. So we ask that you include your email address in your chat message so that we can ensure we do get back to everybody. We have taken precautions to ensure that this is a secure event. However, we cannot guarantee that we will not have any hackers trying to overtake the call. To protect the integrity of the event, should we see any signs of disruption, we'll immediately end the meeting and ask everyone to rejoin via the links, and we'll be readmitted. If anybody is suspected of not being a legitimate member of our community, we may remove them from the meeting, and we apologize if there's any inconvenience or confusion regarding this. So with that, we are going to get started. So really quickly today, we do have 2 speakers for everyone today. Unfortunately, we were not able to have Elizabeth. She had something come up, but we have Teddy Surratt and Jay Mamalo here with us. We will have their speaker session as well as a panel discussion afterwards. Really quick overview. We welcome everyone here. For those of you who are not sure about Strive, Strive is was developed by the Chamber of Commerce for individuals 19 to 40 in our community as a subcommittee of the Chamber of Commerce. We have an elected executive that rotates annually based on its active membership. Our mission is to assist the young professionals in our community in reaching higher potential through community development, networking events, training opportunities, and recognizing achievements for the purpose of attraction and retention of young professionals in our community. Our vision is to be recognized as the principal representing body of young professionals in Sault Ste. Marie through our membership and community involvement. We can work together to make an impact in the community and provide a voice for the young professionals. These benefits will provide an incentive for young professionals to stay and grow within the city of Sault Ste. Marie. And here's a look at who we are. We are the young professionals who are either young in age or young within our career, and we're striving to work with inclusion with everyone here in our community. So with that, that is why these conversations and these events are so important. And I am now going to pass this over to Emily Cormier, who will be your MC today. Emily is our Advocacy and Community Outreach Officer for Strive.
Thanks, Derek. I'm going to ask that you stop sharing your screen so I can start sharing mine. Perfect. Thank you. All right, bear with me, folks. Just going to share the PowerPoint here. Started at the beginning, so we'll breeze through that. So thank you so much. And thank you, Derek, for the great introduction there. But most importantly, thank you to our speakers for giving us their time and willing to be sharing their stories with us today. We're just so thrilled. So before we begin, as we know, the topic of this webinar is diversity. And so we thought we'd begin by asking you all 2 reflection questions. And I'd like to invite you to either reflect on your own or feel free to enter in your response in the chat feature. So the first question that we have is, what do you think of when you hear the word diversity? So I'll just give you a few minutes to think about that, or a few seconds rather, and feel free to use the chat feature if you so desire, and I'm happy to read those out there. I actually can't see the chat function. I don't know if you can, Derek. Maybe you could let me know if you see anything. Oh, unmute yourself, please, Derek.
All right, we do have some coming in, yes.
If you can see them, I can't for some reason on my screen.
Okay, yeah, we have a few coming in. We have inclusion, which is a great one, unity, we have allies and accomplices, perspective.
Awesome. All right, so we're going to go here to the next slide. What do you think of when you hear the word inclusion? So again, I'll ask you to take a few seconds to reflect on that either personally, or if you like, please feel free to use the chat feature, and Derek will, if he sees any words in there, be happy to read them out.
All right, we have one coming in. We have no one left out, acceptance, equality, all, variety, pronouns.
Fantastic. Those are some really great ones. So that's what we just wanted to do to start getting the conversation started. So without further ado, I'd like to start our speakers session for today. I'm going to begin by introducing our first speaker, Theodore or Teddy Surrett. He is a two-spirit queer trans Indigenous advocate and storyteller. Just have to move my screen here. So I'm going to do my best here to pronounce Teddy, so I apologize in advance. Ozawa Nunkwe, Yellow Star Woman. Teddy Surrett is from Rankin Reserve of Batchewana First Nation of the Anishinaabeg people. Teddy is a storyteller and advocate for two-spirit and LGBTQ+ lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, queer people. Teddy has a background in Indigenous and community theater. They have a diploma from Sault College in social service worker, Indigenous specialization, and studied for 1 year at Dimijimijig Theater Group. Before COVID-19, Teddy traveled to different parts of Turtle Island, sharing the story of overcoming bullying through art. Teddy has worked and trained alongside Jumblies Theater, the Garden River Arts Committee, the Musical Comedy Guild of Sault Ste. Marie, and Sulo Theater in Toronto. Teddy lives in Sault Ste. Marie and works as the Indigenous liaison for the Enchanté Network. They enjoy walks on the boardwalk along the St. Mary's River and minding their own business. At least they try to. So without further ado, I'd like to, I'll stop sharing my screen here and I will ask Teddy to please take it over from here. Thank you.
Miigwech, thank you, Emily, for reading the bio. Sometimes I send bios and they're not always the same. I always like to keep it a bit lively and spruce them up a bit. Ani, bonjour. Ojawa Nankwe Nidishna Kais Maigan Nadodam, Obajo and the Donjabang. My name is, my Anishinaabe name is Yellow Star Woman. I sit in the Wolf Clan and I was raised in Rankin Reserve and grew up within the city limits of Sault Ste. Marie. And been here for most of my life. I lived in Manitoulin Island for almost a year studying Indigenous theater and Indigenous storytelling at Debajmajig Theater Group in Manitowoning. So that was really nice to go from a small city in Northern Ontario to an even smaller city on the island of Manitoulin Island. It's very beautiful there. I do enjoy going back whenever I get the chance. I do have actually family from Wikwemikong, unceded First Nation there on the island. So shout out to them as well. But I lived in here. I'm from Sault Ste. Marie. I grew up in on Rankin Reserve and Manatee Park. I attended Manatee Park Elementary School and White Pines here in Sault Ste. Marie. And it wasn't always the greatest times growing up being openly gay. I knew that I was gay at a very young age. Thanks to my grandmother who used to take me to garage sales, and there used to be boxes of books that used to be there, and sometimes it'd be really cheap, like 10 cents a book or 25 cents a book. Or sometimes the boxes, there would be even like free boxes of books. Just grab whatever books you wanted, just take them. And sometimes I would take a whole box of books with me, not knowing what was in them, thinking like, okay, let's just see I'm gonna go and take and read these books, because I really liked reading books. I really liked reading. I think that was something that really opened up my imagination, because in how I was raised, my family was a working family in Sault Ste. Marie until there was different illnesses that afflicted my parents, and so that made it really hard for us to find work and to have like a very average or normal family life that you could like basically see like on TV or even just in the community. There was one point in time growing up in the 90s where I remember we had 2 cars and we go out for dinner all the time, and we would do all of these things that you would normally do with your family. And then there was some sort of recession that happened in the 90s, and my parents didn't have work anymore, and we stopped going to all the things. And I remember growing up on the reserve and growing up in my community, and we would make fun of children who were on welfare, not thinking about what their life or their experiences were like, just knowing that they were on welfare so we can make fun of them. And then later on in my childhood, and like being a child who is also on welfare, on social assistance, I'm like, okay, now I'm part of the joke. Okay, now like that experience kind of switched in that moment, because we came from something of like going to all like these dinners and not going to dinners, going out to having these cars and then not having any cars at all, and resorting to the transit system of Sault Ste. Marie. So it was really difficult with all those different factors. On top of that being brown, because I think in Sault Ste. Marie, I was able to blend in a lot of different circles and in different communities. But a lot of times if I came out as being Indigenous, or if I came out as being First Nation, or if people ask me like what community I lived in, I'm like, oh, I'm from Rankin. And they're like, oh, you're from the reserve, you're from the res. What is it like there? I'm like, it's kind of like every other community in Sault Ste. Marie, I think. I didn't even really know what a reserve was in Sault Ste. When I grew up until someone told me, because we didn't practice our culture in Sault Ste. Marie. We didn't go to a lot of ceremonies or practice our traditions in our household or speak our Anishinaabe language. So I didn't really know who I was growing up until other people were telling me that, hey, you're native, you're not this, you're not that. So this is what it means to be First Nation, or what it means to be Ojibwe. And that was the term I was used at the time. But now I'm like a proud Anishinaabe person. And for me, it was asking those questions and reading those books, going back to those books, because when I found those books, that's when I was able to find terminology in different worlds and different experiences that kind of matched my own. So like one of the words was homosexual. And I didn't know what homosexual was, but I knew there were kids on the playground who were calling me a homo. And as I kind of put 2 and 2 together, and I was like, okay, so I read that in this book, it means like when 2 guys like each other. And someone was like, yeah, that's what it means. And I'm like, oh, okay, because I think that's me. Because I think that feels right for me. Because people are like, what do you think about this person? Or do you find this person attractive? And I'm like, no, I never found any of those other people attractive, but I really found people who were like me, who were like guys. And like, I don't necessarily identify as a guy right now. Like I identify as being 2-spirit, and like also gender fluid. So my pronouns are they and them. So when it comes to inclusion, and for me, it was like, I was always finding about more information. Because I think once you start asking those questions, once you start reading information, once you start building that awareness, you can start fixing some of those gaps that you might have in your own knowledge, or what you think you might know about gender, or when it comes to sexuality, or when it comes to being Indigenous, or when it comes to practicing allyship and standing up for others. So luckily I had theater to help me cope through some of the bullying and torment I went through as a younger person. That's what got me into finding my own voice. studying at DeBajamajig, it started teaching me about facilitation and how to facilitate conversations and how to teach people different things. Even though it was like storytelling and learning and improv, it helped me out later on as like a facilitator and an educator when it comes to talking about diversity, when it comes to talking about inclusion, practicing inclusion for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, gay and queer people. Or also practicing inclusion for First Nations people, or practicing inclusion for people of color. So by sharing my experience and what that kind of looked like going through theater, growing up on the reserve, growing up in Sault Ste. Marie, especially, because some of those stories really resonate to a lot of different communities that I've been to across Turtle Island. So I've had the ability to live in Toronto. I just moved back to Sault Ste. Marie about over a year ago. Because on dealing with all of this, everything that I go through and the conversations that I talk to, there's also like the everyday life that people have to experience. And so unfortunately, throughout my experience through the communities I've been able to go to share my stories and to talk about inclusion and diversity, I've also had to deal with the loss of both of my parents in a very short period of time. So dealing with everything that you have to go through, I think it's just about understanding experience. And for me, it's that kind of work is like trying to share people's experiences and understanding who's in the room, who's in the community that you're sharing with, and what kind of behavior or language is being used, or what kind of language or behavior is not being used. And it's great now because right now I'm on a leave of absence to take care of my mental health. And I think that's the one thing doing this kind of work is like really understanding how to take care of ourselves. I think with COVID-19 and the pandemic, it really made me make a stop and reflect on my own life and what I needed to get done and what I really, really need to heal, and what my other goals were in life. Because prior to COVID-19, I was traveling all over Canada and Southern Ontario and Northern Ontario to talk about inclusion, to talk about what does it mean to accept others? What does it mean to find those allies with those lived experiences, the shared experiences? Because there's a lot of times when I go to different communities, I don't try to tell them like, this is what Toronto is doing, or this is what Sudbury is doing, or this is what Sioux Pride is doing. It's like, okay, what is happening in this community or in the center or this organization? And what needs to be done, who's in the room, and how can we fill in those gaps? Because and then providing resources and information later on. Because I really think that with group sharing and just being open and honest with each other, we can start filling in those gaps that we need to fill in when it comes to providing services or connecting with others and building those relationships with people, and to have a better understanding with our community. And I think that was the one thing. I worked at the Sioux Community Career Center when I was at Sioux College, and that's why I was able to get the privilege of meeting Jane. And that experience has definitely helped me understanding connection and understanding diversity, because sometimes racism walked into our front door and I had to be, hello, bonjour, not understanding where that person might be coming from. And that's what I always ask different workshops and different audiences. I was like, because what does an LGBTQ person look like? They can look like anybody on this conversation today. What does an Indigenous person look like? They could also look like anybody in this conversation. So we do have to be mindful of when we're trying when we're in this community, and like when we're being around others, because there's different places I go to and they're like, oh, well, we don't have gay people here, or we don't have transgender people here, or we don't have Indigenous people who access our services. Or then I was like, there's a really good chance that you might be there, that there might be Indigenous people or trans people or gay people in those spaces. They just might not be comfortable to be out or be comfortable to tell you or share with you that part of their experience. And they might have to hide that because of safety. And I think that was the one thing working at the Career Center where it's like, okay, I feel a level of safety where racism is not tolerated here at the center. So that's one thing I didn't have to worry about. There are other things I had to worry about, but luckily I've been able to grow and learn about what those presented. And so I think that's the one thing that I do with my work. It's just understanding where people are coming from and where do we want to go as a community. Because if we don't, we can lose so much. And with Sue Pride, when I helped get Sue Pride up running 7 years ago for funding, it was a grant opportunity with Nordic Institute, and that was called Soup St. Marie. So we pitched in a proposal to get some funding for Sue Pride, and we won. And it was a matter too, like, okay, what do we do next with that responsibility? And that was a matter of connecting with the community. And it's like, okay, what do we need? How do we respond? What are the next steps? And that resulted within like a year later, even like not even a year later, where we celebrated the first Pride Community Festival in Sault Ste. Marie. And it's really great to hear. So I'm able to share that story with multiple communities. So when communities are like, what should we do? Where should we start? And it's really great to see that communities like Red Lake, Ontario, Walpole Island First Nation have all started celebrating their first Pride initiatives by starting to have those conversations with those community members. And I think that's the one thing that we really need to do is like, we need to really stop how we usually work and figure out what is not working, who's at the table, who isn't at the table, and who really should be, and how can we carve space to make sure that there's a voice, that there's representation there. Because it's 2020 and we still need a lot of work to do here in Sault Ste. Marie. But it needs to start. It's going to take a lot longer if we don't start having those conversations and starting to maybe do those self-evaluations on like, what are our own viewpoints when it comes to gender and acceptance, when it comes to sexuality, when it comes to gender, when it comes to race, and what is that bias? And like, learning anything is hard. Unlearning anything is even harder. So if it's learning inclusion, we can learn to be inclusive, but we can also unlearn a bit of bias. We can also unlearn racism. I believe so. And I think that's the kind of hope that I still have with this work. If I didn't have hope, I wouldn't be doing this work. But even with COVID, it kind of gives me a little bit more hope because it makes us have to work a little bit harder. Because even on Zoom, it's a privilege to be on Zoom right now and to have Wi-Fi and to have a laptop, because there's so many other communities who don't have that. There's youth, seniors, newcomers to Canada, all these different folks who don't have that access. And we also need to be thinking of them and like, how do we make sure that they're connected? Because we're starting to COVID's not going to go away anytime soon, I don't think. And we're getting into the winter months. And it's the one thing that I miss about Toronto is the winters. There's a lot more sunlight. It's a little bit more warmer. There's a lot less snow. Last winter was a really hard winter to be back. As somebody who does have like a seasonal affective disorder, it can be a really tough time. So for me, it's just an understanding of like to check in with those who you care for. Check in with those who might need a little bit more space, who might need an extra message. I'm very happy that we have Skip the Dishes and Uber Eats here. Send them a meal. Order them some groceries. We have Instacart. There's ways to do it now. I'm so glad that kind of innovation is here, because it was one thing for me, it was one thing that for me not to come back. I was like, okay, if there's not an Uber, I don't know if I can do it, because I don't know if I can do the city buses. Luckily, when I did move back, the city of Sault Ste. Marie did buy some of Toronto city buses. And I get to see the road every day. So I get to see the Toronto buses every day. So it reminds me of that other part of home too, in the big city. But it's also I'm also really glad to be back here in Sault Ste. Marie in Boating, right across the tracks from the reserve where I grew up. And it's a very big honor to be back, because I don't usually talk too much back here in the community of Sault Ste. Marie. And I hope to change that moving forward so we can start building those bridges together. So Chibagwich, and thank you so much.
Well, Miigwech Teddy, thank you so much for sharing your story. Some really, really great advice. And I look forward to having more opportunities to hear you speak in our community, because you have a great story to share. And I'm sure that there are others who maybe aren't so brave, but would really benefit from hearing your story. So thank you so much. I'm going to go and share my screen again here. And we will get ready to listen to our next speaker. So I would like to introduce Jane Amolo, President of the African Caribbean Canadian Association of Northern Ontario, or ACANO. Jane Amolo has served as Manager of Newcomer Programs since 2012 at the Sioux Community Career Center. She is the current President of the African Caribbean Canadian Association of Northern Ontario, a nonprofit, non-political, and non-denominational association that develops and promotes the awareness of cultural heritage, diversity, and anti-racism efforts in the Sioux. Jane holds a master's degree in public administration from Queen's University, as well as a master's in education teaching and learning from Brock University. Amolo is a recipient of various awards, including the 2018 Newcomer Ambassador of the Year Award by the Local Immigration Partnership and 2017 International Women's Day honoree by the Business and Professional Women's Club of Sault Ste. Marie. So Jane, I know you have a couple of slides. I've got them embedded in mine. If you'd like, I can change them for you, or would you like to share your screen? Oh, Jane, I'll need you to unmute there. Would you like me to move your slides, Jane?
Yes, please share the slides.
Okay, will do.
So I'll share very briefly about my life. And I would like first and foremost to thank Teddy for being very bold and very brave in sharing your story. It's not very easy to open up and share your story with others, but in so doing, we learn from one another. We learn the struggles that we have gone through in life, and we also learn to appreciate each other uniquely and differently. And as Teddy was sharing his story growing up here and having moments to step out and come back, I reflected a lot on the time that we worked together at the Sioux Community Career Center. And one thing that I vividly remember was a young man, hardworking, who really wanted to contribute and make a difference in the community that we live in. So I applaud you, Teddy, for the work that you have done and for the advocacy work that you continue to do in order to increase and bring awareness of diversity in our community and in our country. And I'll start by saying that respect for humanity and dignity for all, for me, is the basis why we talk about diversity, why we talk about inclusion, why we talk about equity. Because if you and me have respect for each other and value the dignity for life that everybody brings, we will not be here talking about diversity. We'll be here more so celebrating it than looking at how can we be more accepting to one another. I was born and raised in Kenya, the western part of Kenya, and I normally tell everybody I meet that the reason why I chose to come to Sault Ste. Marie is because I loved the winter, I loved the cold, and I loved the bears. And so when Teddy talks about Toronto being warmer and them receiving more sunshine than we do, I'm reminding myself that I chose Sault Ste. Marie and I chose the full package. And that included the winters, and that included everything that comes with it. We moved to Canada with my family in 2003. And for about a year, we lived in Toronto. And then I decided to go back to school. So we moved to St. Catharines for me to be able to do my master's in education there. And it was during that time that my husband found a job in Sault Ste. Marie. And I remember us looking at the map and poring over the computer to really try to understand where this place was, because most of the things had been done virtually, and asking my neighbors more about whether they knew the Sioux, how far it was. Everybody seemed not to be very positive about the Sioux. But within our hearts, we felt, you know what, where there's a will, there is a way. And so that's the reason why we moved here to the Sioux. And we are blessed with 4 children. 2 of them we got here in Canada, and Canada has been a great blessing to me. I would like to say at the beginning of our stay here was not easy. It came with the normal challenges that every newcomer is presented with. And I think it was a little bit worse when we arrived than it is right today. But at the center of it all, the hope that I had and what really kept me moving was my determination within me to make a difference where I live. And so in between going back to school, raising my kids before I started seriously looking for work, I found a lot of emptiness within my life in terms of a sense of belonging. Sometimes you can live in a land of plenty, but you live there feeling very poor in spirit. And that's how I felt when I moved to the Sioux, because I felt the community was such a close knit that trying to break through that wall wasn't that easy. And it was particularly challenging for me because I'm a person of color. For many times, my kids were the only Black kids in their school, in the playground. There have been a lot of incidences where me as a family, we have faced racism. And so I said, how can I do to rise above what is going on? And as I met a few individuals like me, we decided to come together and just start by doing potlucks, meeting, because when you raise your kids that are different from the larger community, one thing that I strive for myself is to make sure that they are rooted in their culture, in their diversity, because that is really what enriches all of us. So the coming together and the forming of Akano was created because we felt there was a need for us to come together and really provide an opportunity for ourselves and for the children who are growing up in this community not to grow up with their identity and to really rely on knowing who they are in the larger scheme of things. So Akano was created as a small grassroots organization in 2010. And I'll talk about Akano today because that's really where I want to center my conversation. And I'll also talk very briefly about the work that I've started doing at Algoma University because since September 1st, I took on a new position as the EDI officer at Algoma University, and everything is all tied in terms of the work that we do that will increase diversity, inclusion, and equity in the community that we live in. So Akano is organized exclusively as a not-for-profit, non-political, and non-denominational association that seeks to develop, promote, and grow awareness of our cultural heritage while promoting unity in our community. The association is volunteer-based and membership is open to all the residents of Algoma region of African, Black, West Indian descent, their families, and friends. And our mission is to develop, to promote, and to grow awareness of our cultural heritage through education and advocacy, and to positively impact the socioeconomic development of the community. Our vision is to foster a legacy for our African Caribbean culture by contributing to the development of the Canadian society through active, equitable, and collective integration. Akano strives to improve the diversity in our community as I will outline it in the points below. And if anyone has not had the opportunity, for example, to join us during our annual Black History Month celebrations, I'm hoping and praying that COVID will be a thing of the past so that we can get together again and really get to know what Akano does and some of the things that we'd like to see the rest of the community join us and participate in doing. So our objectives are listed as below: to be active participants in the community through interactive educational programs about our culture. We do this whether we come together as a group or whether you reach out to us. We have a website, www.akano.ca. If you have an opportunity, you can go check it out. All the events that we have done in the past are there. We have held several sessions, and whenever we have a video that we record, we also post it there because we do believe that that's a great interactive space where everybody can go and learn about the things that we do. We also gather or come together to promote and assist with the integration of new immigrants in the community. Currently, right now, we have a program that we are running. It's called Parents, Caregivers, and is funded by YOF through Trillium. We got funding for 2 years, and that funding allows us to come together as a group of Akano parents and caregivers to provide support one to another, because it's a program designed by, for, and with. In that way, as we come together and gather, we can really have a safe space where we talk about issues that affect us and how we can be able to move forward and how we can be part of the community in addressing the issues that uniquely and specifically affect our lives. Another objective is to increase our visibility through active participation in the community, also to bring together all the residents of Northern Ontario, their families, their friends, to promote and provide a forum for children and the youth to learn about our diversity. And last but not least is to create and maintain a network of business resources among the African Caribbean community. One thing that we always remind ourselves is there is power in coming together, and there is power in sharing information and resources, because through the sharing of the resources that we have, we get to know what's happening out there. We get to invite other people who are not Akano members to come in and help us understand some of the things that we may not understand. The journey has not been easy, and so I'll briefly talk about some of the challenges that we have faced, and I'm going to link it up with what Teddy was talking about, being comfortable with the uncomfortable. I'm sure many of us have been following what has been going on, especially in the summer when COVID was at its peak. Black Lives Matter and all the events that were happening in the US, that there was an overflow of it in the community here, was felt negatively and impacted many of our lives, not in a very good way. And the reason why I want us to stop and reflect about it is because I believe each one of us in this room has a role to play. And if we play our role, we'll be able to help the community to move forward, the country to move forward, every human person to move forward, because again, I began by saying that respect for humanity and dignity for all should be the basis upon which we gather and come together as human beings. So dealing with systemic racism and discrimination and how this disproportionately affects racialized communities, especially we, the Black people, Indigenous people of color, and other people of color, is one of the challenges that we continue to face living in this community. Sometimes it's very overt. It's right on your face, you see it. Sometimes it's through small microaggressions that hide behind assumptions and biases. I know we all have our biases as we grow up. However, the magnitude at which some of them present themselves is usually not in a very comfortable space. So that is one of the main challenges that as Akano members, as people of color, as Black people, we continue to face in this community. And I would like to give a call to every one of us to reflect and ask ourselves, what is it that we can do to make sure that we can root out the systemic racism and discrimination that is so prevalent in our communities, or that hides and masks itself in the biases that we have, or in the small little microaggressions that sometimes you never get to know what it is until somebody moves you apart to tell you that what you said was inappropriate, what you said was not kind, what you said hurt me. I would also like to encourage you to go on our website. We have a video that we posted there on Akano Reflects That's a reflection we had after George Floyd's event in the US. It was very well attended. It was very emotional. It is very raw. As you watch it, I want you to keep asking yourself, what can you do to make a change? Or how can you be an ally? Because the work that we do, we need a lot of people who can be strong allies, who can stand up in the face of racism and tell the offender that what you are doing is not right, who can be able to speak out and speak out for those who are oppressed, who can be able to come and say, what is it that you're planning that I can be a part of? So what do we think is the greatest opportunity or the advantages of increasing diversity in our community? I created my slides with the questions that Emily had sent me. And as I reflect upon what diversity is and what it can do in our community, I also reflect on the great things that diversity does. And many times I'm told that Sault Ste. Marie was built upon immigration. And I'm sure that there is none of us here who can deny that to be a fact. We have Italians who moved here many years ago. We have the British who moved here many years ago. We have the French who moved here many years ago. We have all different groups of people who moved here at different times. And now we have an emerging group of newcomers who are moving in. When we look at the times that we are living in, for example, the city of Sault Ste. Marie is running the Rural Northern Immigration Pilot Program. The Rural Northern Immigration Pilot Program is targeting talented newcomers to come to the Sioux and contribute to the economic well-being of this city. Why? Why are we at a point where we are saying we want to receive immigrants, we want to receive newcomers, we want them to come here? Is because there is an identified need. And so when you look at the global connectivity that there's a small city like Sault Ste. Marie can have just because of diversity, then it makes you realize the positive things that diverse individuals bring to an economy, bring to a country, bring to a community. When I walk through the malls here and I see the different things that are put there, even just go to Metro and look at the aisles that they have, go to Roms and look at the food aisles that they have, you will see how diverse we have become and how diverse we continue to be. And then you look at the financial injection that immigration brings and gives to our community. In 2018, more than 350,000 immigrants came to Canada as permanent residents. Yesterday, I was listening to the news and the Ministry of Immigration was talking about changing some rules so that they could allow immigrants to come from Hong Kong and settle in Canada, or they could make it easier for the students who are here, for other individuals from Hong Kong who are here to be able to find a pathway to remain here. And if you listen to the news yesterday, it was all centered around economy. It was all centered around the contributions that immigrants make when they come to the country. So when we look at the positive things that immigration brings or diversity that diversity brings, then we realize that there is a good component or the contributions that everybody provides to make Sault Ste. Marie thriving community, to make the country a thriving economy, is because each and everybody is here to contribute. They increase the social capital of the place where we live in. So there are so many advantages and so many positive things that immigration brings. And if we can acknowledge that immigration brings a lot of good and positive things, what can we do to make sure that when the newcomers come to settle in Sault Ste. Marie, how can we make their settlement easier? How can we make their stay here more positive? How can we make sure that they realize their full potential? Because that is to the benefit not only of them, but the benefit of the whole city and of the whole community. My last slide, I looked at the cultural iceberg. And this is a very common thing that many of us usually talk about. You must have seen it in a textbook. You must have seen it in a presentation. I thought I would use it to wrap my conversation with you today. When we talk about diversity, there are so many things that we normally focus on. There's that you see on the surface, which only accounts for 10%. And then there's that you don't see, which is always underneath, that accounts for 90%. And many a times the judgment that comes is only because you've seen that small 10%. You see the color, you see the gender, you see the style, but what lies beneath, what lies below, those are the things that we don't normally see. And so what can we do as a community? What can we do as Sault Ste. Marie to help move the agenda of diversity, inclusion, and equity forward? I believe awareness and education about other cultures is number one. People hide behind ignorance, and we know that ignorance is no excuse. So it's up to you and me to educate ourselves on what we need to know about other cultures. And new cultures are always willing and open to share their history, their food, their music, their way of life with others who don't know or who needs to know much about them. Let's promote and celebrate welcoming and inclusive communities. What does that mean? I believe that in every one of us, there is an opportunity to do good, and so there's an opportunity to celebrate. And so let's focus on celebrating those moments whereby we see what diversity does and the value added when we have everybody from different places, everybody who looks different, everybody who adds different things on the contributions that we have in the community. Last but not least, let's all advance equity, diversity, and inclusion as a way to promote excellence for all. And that has to start from the dinner tables in our homes. I normally say everything that you see happening outside there is learned. Racism is learned, and therefore racism can be unlearned. And so what are the things that we need to learn? And where do we learn them? Charity begins at home. I was told that when I was very young. And so I also believe conversations around diversity, equity, and inclusion need to start on our dinner tables, because you as mom, you as dad, you as a cousin and uncle, if you can have those honest, genuine conversations on your dinner tables and start reflecting other people as human beings who need to be respected, you'll help advance a good perception on what diversity is to others. When kids go to school, what do we teach them? What do they hear? Because most of the time they reflect what they hear, they reflect what they learn. So if we can be part of the learning from a very early age, I believe we'll be talking about a different space where we can continue to celebrate our differences. We can continue to move together as a group that is diverse, however, as a group that is united by the common things that unite us. And as human beings, we have a lot of common things that unite us. I know we can never be the same in everything, but I know that there are basics and foundational things in life that make us all equal, and we can start by working from there. Being a strong ally is something that I would really recommend, because when you're a strong ally, you're saying, yes, I understand, yes, I know, yes, I'll help advocate and move this forward for you. When we were, I remember just after we had we organized, Algoma University students and Akano organized a demonstration that ended up at Algoma University. And a few months after that, if you remember, somebody went and burnt all the posters that had been on the grounds of Algoma University. And that was such an insult to us. So what we decided to do was to come together and say, can we not have a session where we can all learn together, where we can all ask those honest questions, and where we can have a safe space where if there's a moment to learn, we can learn from one another. So what we have embarked on is an anti-Black racism training session that we will be providing to the community, because I deeply believe that if there's an opportunity to educate and to learn so that we can all move forward, then you grab that opportunity and you move it forward. So if you have an organization that is looking forward to have an anti-Black racism training done to their staff, to individuals, to groups, feel free to reach out to me. Feel free to reach out to Akano. We'll organize and be able to present and provide that training so that we can all look back and move forward as one group. So thank you for the opportunity to be here again, Emily. Thank you, Strive, for organizing a good session like today. I really appreciate the time that you made all to attend this session. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jane. I really think I can speak on behalf of our members and those attending today that you really do bring a great perspective. And thank you for sharing your story about coming to Canada as well. You know, that's always, I think people can relate, and it's important. I think if I can speak to what both you and Teddy said, you know, we need to understand other people's experiences so that we can move forward in a better way. So I thank you both so much for sharing your stories. So the next part of our presentation would have been Liz, but unfortunately she couldn't come here today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just quickly read her bio for those attending. And I'm going to say, if you have any questions or you'd like to speak to her, please email us. Our email's on the screen there, info@striveypg.com. So Elizabeth is the director of the Shingwak Residential School Center at Algoma University. She is an honors graduate of Mount Royal College Social Service Worker Program and holds a Bachelor of Arts in Anishinaabe-Moan from Algoma U, a Bachelor's of Education from Queen's University, and is currently pursuing her Master's of Arts in Interdisciplinary Studies from Athabasca University. She has been a youth/children's trainer for over 30 years, a family and community development specialist serving Canada and the United States, and has been a featured regional/national conference motivational speaker using storytelling, humor, and wit combined with audience participation. She teaches and works to ensure culture is celebrated. She works at Algoma University and manages the Shingwak Residential School Center. Reading about Ojibwe worldview perspectives and the creation stories of the Ojibwe are a favorite. So again, Elizabeth couldn't be with us today, but if you have any questions or would like to get in touch with her, please reach out to Strive at info@striveypg.com. So I know we're getting kind of crunched for time here, so I'm going to kind of breeze into our panel discussion. Hopefully we have a couple of minutes to ask our panelists some questions that we've collected from our members. So I'll begin with our first question for today, and I'll start with Teddy. So question number one, seeing as many of our Strive Young Professional Group members are looking to establish their careers, can you share any insight and experience on how to ensure that young professionals can work to encourage workplace diversity and inclusivity?
Yeah, I think it's by a matter of sticking to what you know. So if you're interested in media, if you're interested in the arts, if you're interested in academics or business, that there are folks of different cultures and different community backgrounds who are in those industries that you might have an interest in, and so looking for those kind of connections. Who are those Indigenous business people within the community of Sault Ste. Marie or in Canada at large? Who are those trans musicians within the music industry that if you're a musician, so I think it's finding those ways, and I think it's like by listening to one story, you start understanding a little bit more, and you're not going to learn everything about inclusion and how to practice diversity within yourself as a professional, but because it'll take time. But again, if you don't take that time, if you don't make that time within your schedules to learn about inclusivity or how to be inclusive towards others, then it's going to take a lot more time to learn what you might need to learn, or what you might need to unlearn about diversity and inclusion. Because there are some people who are really reluctant to the concept of what does it mean. But again, by asking those questions and making those connections, you can start really finding those ways of similarities where you can start supporting one another and learning to be inclusive.
Thanks, Teddy. I appreciate that. Jane, do you want to comment on that question as well?
Thank you, Teddy, for the great insights. Mine is to encourage all the young professionals that we cannot talk about diversity if we can't talk about inclusion, and if we cannot talk about equity. So we are counting on you to be our EDI champions in our communities and in your workplaces, because if we can get you to be champions as the youth, then we know, because you are our leaders of tomorrow, then we know that we are encouraging and creating leaders who will be responsible in the future.
Thank you for that, Jane. I appreciate the insight. I'm going to skip to our last question here, just in the essence of time. We did have a couple of others, but I think number 5 probably sums them all up. So I'll go back to Teddy for your response on this one. First, if there is one piece of advice that can be given to any member of the community to help Sault Ste. Marie and Algoma become even more accepting and welcoming, what would that be?
Well, it makes me think about like the sign downtown right near City Hall. And it's like Algoma, friendliest city of Algoma. And so I think it's like we really need to match that description if we want to live up to that sign. If not, we need to replace that sign. So if we want to be friendly, we need to be friendly to everybody, and not people who just look like us or who sound like us or have similar stories to us. Because if those are the only stories that you know, then that's the only story that you're going to know in your bubble. Your circles might start looking very different. Was when you start reaching out and start building those connections and having those relationships. And there's so many different ways, and there's so many different teachers, and it's great to be with Jane and like have a condo to have her teachings, but also like the Indian Friendship Center here in Sault Ste. Marie downtown. If you want to get access to inclusion measures or training there, facilitation. I myself and also Sue Pride also do different conversations, I believe. So the information's out there because we're still there. It's just a matter of people doing that work and stepping away out of your comfort zones.
Perfect. Thank you, Teddy. Jane, any comments on that question?
Thank you, Emily. I would like to sum it up by saying, let us stand for what is just, and let us stand for what is right. Let us call out racism when we see it. Let us be an ally of the racialized community. Let's work to see diverse voices on our decision-making tables. Let's provide opportunities for all. Let's work to bring this visibility to all the diverse cultures that are in Sault Ste. Marie. And let's continue to celebrate the diverse cultures. And above everything else, I want to end by asking a question for everybody to go home and reflect on, and I'll piggyback on what Teddy said. How can we be the friendliest city when there is still so much systemic racism and discrimination in our community? Thank you.
Well put, Jane. And I think, and Teddy, I think I can speak for Strive as well as those attending that we wish that this conversation could just continue. We had a couple more questions that we wanted to ask, but unfortunately in the essence of time, we are going to have to wrap up our panel discussion. But I just want to say thank you so much again for your time and sharing your stories and getting the message out there. So unfortunately, we don't have time to ask you these questions again to the members who are participating, but I encourage you all to now think, what do you think about when you hear the word diversity? And also, what do you think now when you hear the word inclusion? And I'll ask that you take some time to please reflect on that and hopefully encourage some change in your actions or understand others' experiences and get out there and try not to be a bystander if you're seeing things happen. On that note, once again, I would like to thoroughly thank our speakers for giving us their time and sharing their stories. And thank you to everyone who registered and attended this meeting. This is Strive's first ever virtual Lunch and Learn. And we're hoping that we'll be able to do many more of these in the future, seeing as COVID is going to be around for a while. So without further ado, I thank you all for your time. If you have any questions or feedback about this webinar, please reach out to Strive at info@striveypg.ca. And you can also follow us on social media. We're on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. So thank you so much, everyone. I really do appreciate you all attending, especially thank you to our speakers. So I wish everyone a wonderful afternoon and the weekend's here. So try to get outside, stay safe, and thank you so much for joining us in this important conversation. And we look forward to working with our members and the rest of the community on moving forward in improving diversity and inclusion in Sault Ste. Marie. Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks, Emily. Bye, everyone.